Welcome to the Pastor Podcast with Randy and Andy, where Sunday's sermon sparks Wednesday's conversation. Each week, they sit down to dive deeper, reflect thoughtfully, and wrestle with the themes of this week's message. Their goal is to explore faith more fully, ask the hard questions, and invite you into a dialogue that goes beyond the pulpit.
Welcome into the podcast, everyone. I'm Pastor Randy Moore.
And I'm Pastor Andy Payton.
Yeah, we're the pastors here at the Methodist Temple, United Methodist Church at Evansville, Indiana. I like to say that for our worldwide audience, just so they know where we are.
Right, because we're global.
That's right. Well, we are still in the season of Easter. We say this to the point where people probably get tired of it, but Easter is not, it's not one day, and it's not even a season. It's a long season. It's a 50-day season, but Easter is an all-the-time thing for Christian people, Easter people.
I mean, it's the lens that it's the lens of our faith, really. But yeah, I mean, there is a liturgical season we call Easter. Mm-hmm. But as you've said a couple times in our podcast recently, Randy, every Sunday is kind of like a little Easter.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. It's the framework that we're supposed to use or called to use as a Christian people.
Yeah. And it is why that we are in a series right now in the Easter season called Finding Jesus. Why don't you give us the overview and then we'll start breaking down some of the messages.
I mean, it sounds basic, but what are we trying to get at? Well, it's the idea that if we're going to find Jesus, if we're going to see Christ, then the big shift is you have to understand that it's not about extraordinary. Instead, Christ is found in the ordinary. Mm-hmm. And it's in the gardener who welcomes Mary Magdalene at the tomb. It's Christ is found in the strangers who are walking down the Emmaus Road and they welcome a stranger. So it's in the act of hospitality. These kinds of what we think of as ordinary things are really reflections of the risen Christ and expressions of Christ's presence with us. And so we're trying to get people to recognize these things as divine encounters.
And then where do you think people look for Jesus other than in the ordinary? I mean, what are we speaking out, not against, but as an alternative to what?
Well, two things I would say. Number one of the big challenges of the faith, and one of the big challenges I see within the Christian faith today is that for some reason we've been conditioned to live our lives as if God were somewhere else. Mm-hmm. We've been conditioned to think about the risen Christ as somewhere else, up in heaven with God, away from here. Mm-hmm. That's one of the big challenges. The second one is that I think in our consumer culture, it's kind of shaped us in a way where we assume that God is with us when it feels great. We assume that God is with us when it's all rainbows and unicorns. No. Christ is always with us. And in fact, a lot of the times, Christ is found in the broken places, the painful moments. It's in these moments, really, that we find these Christ moments where the love of God begins to shine through.
Yeah, it is out of the darkness. So many times it's out of the darkness. This is going to be in something we talk about today a little bit later in the podcast when we get into the story of Mary Magdalene at the tomb. That's
what I love about the Christian faith, Randy. It's like we don't deny suffering.
Sure.
We serve a crucified Savior. So we don't pretend like it's not real. We don't pretend like it's not there. Mm-hmm. We say, absolutely, life is painful. We know that. We see that. And yet, we also believe God is waiting to be found in that pain, not as the cause, to be clear, not as the cause, but this is where God's love shines through, at least in a way where we recognize God's love and we see God's love. Again, it's like that friend that shows up to see us when we're grieving. It's that person who welcomes us when we've kind of lost our way or these kinds of things. That's where it's happening.
Okay, let's talk about the first installment of our series, and you handled that one, and it came from the first chapter of John and the story of Jesus's first disciples.
Yeah, so it's the calling of the first disciples in the John gospel, as you said. And the thing I love about it is Jesus is not like, repent, you sinner, get your act together. It's not like that at all in John's gospel. When the disciples first see Jesus, essentially what Jesus says is, come home with me.
Right.
Hang out with me. And I find that to be a very, very helpful metaphor, symbol for what it means to live out our faith today. What's it mean to live out our faith? Well, it means that we realize that we're called to make our homes with God. And to even push a little farther, building on our conversation today, Randy, we realize that this world is the home of God.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus is saying, come home with me. See me. Mm-hmm. Be home.
The word there is abide. Come stay with me. Come abide with me. Mm-hmm. That's a big word in John, and it carries a lot of depth, that abiding.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, so radical.
Mm-hmm.
John is so incarnational in the way he's presenting the theology of Jesus. We get a picture of a God in John's gospel that is with us, for us, in us.
Mm-hmm.
Do you just think about how close is God to us? Well, God's with us, for us,
mm-hmm.
in us.
Yeah.
I mean, that might hit a little too close to home, but it's. I think that's the Christian message.
Yeah.
Though.
This might get a little bit Bible nerdy, but do you think part of what John is doing is hitting head on the delay, what we call the delayed parousia, the delayed coming of Jesus, so that, hey, Jesus is with us. Jesus is incarnate.
Yeah, I mean,
God is incarnate.
To get a little nerdy, I guess, John's gospel is probably the last gospel written, so it's probably
mm-hmm.
written towards the end of the first century.
Mm-hmm.
So just to put that into context, Jesus dies. He's risen around the year 30.
Mm-hmm.
So roughly, I don't know, 60 years, we'll say. 60
mm-hmm.
years has passed. That's a long time.
Right.
People are thinking, well, where's he at? You know? Yeah. And John is trying to present the gospel in such a way that he's saying, look, it's still relevant. It's still, right. Even though maybe our expectation was not the way it should be, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the question that comes up is, where is Jesus in these lessons, especially that one that we talked about from the first chapter of John. And then I'm going to talk about Mary Magdalene at the tomb with Jesus. And the question there is, where is Jesus? The tomb is empty. Where is Jesus? So that's a question that was going on at that time. Not just the time of the resurrection, but at the time of the community of John. Mm-hmm. Where is Jesus? And I think that explains part of this idea that people don't recognize Jesus. It's a more of a it takes a little bit of a spiritual scene. Mary Magdalene thinks it's the gardener. We're going to talk about in the third installment. I'm going to hit the second, but in the third installment, you are going to preach on the road to Emmaus, the walk to Emmaus, mm-hmm. and those disciples don't recognize Jesus. And so I think, I always think that's from John. That story to me sounds a lot like John. That story is actually from Luke, but I think that's part of it. That there's that struggle. Where is Jesus? Well, he's right in front of you.
Right.
If you can only see him.
If you can only see it, recognize. And the stories we find in the Gospels where the risen Christ appears, it's always curious to me to think through the actual moment of recognition. What happens in the lesson we're going to talk about here in a moment. It's when he uses her name. Mm-hmm. I think that's interesting to me. I mean, we can talk a little more about that in a moment. And then, in the Emmaus story, it's when he goes home with them. He's like, hey, come stay with us. And then he breaks the bread and they're like, oh, there he is. And so what do we learn here? And I think there's some very practical things to be found mm-hmm. in these recognition type moments in terms of how we live out our day-to-day lives in terms of being a faithful people.
I'm going to go ahead and read then. Let's move into this second installment. It was my pleasure and opportunity to give the message last Sunday, and it came from the 20th chapter of John, verses 11 to 18. We don't always read these texts, but I'm going to read this one. This one is so beautiful, and in many ways it speaks for itself. I mean, and that's why these stories are there, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, sometimes we can just read them, set them down, and go on. So here's what it says. Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb, and she saw two angels in white sitting where the body of Jesus had been lying, one at the head and the other at the feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." When she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Do not touch me, because I have not yet ascended to the Father, but go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them that he had said these things to her. Again, just a beautiful story of pain and weeping and mourning, and then recognition and joy. Mm-hmm. But for John, and we could have talked about this as we were describing how John is different from the other Gospels. The first Gospels are called synoptic Gospels because there's a sameness about those three. And John is different. It comes later, and there's been more time to think about what it really means. And John does have, there's a layer that's on the surface. There's a narrative layer. There's a story layer that's there in John. But there's always another layer that runs below the surface, and that requires a little bit of digging to find out what that was, and that's what I tried to do in my message.
Well, yeah, I mean, John's clearly doing that. Whenever she starts to cling on to him, John goes into, I'll call him John mode, and starts theologizing, right. And the way that he has Jesus saying, "I'm going to my God and your God," and there's this almost mystical language there. But yeah. So anyway, I don't want to get too far ahead. I know you have a lot of good things to say.
That's okay. So we do need to back up a little bit when we take a text to preach on. It has to be fairly short, and so this really kind of picks it up in the middle of the story. So we really need to rewind to chapter 20, verse 1, so that after the crucifixion and the burial of Jesus, the resurrection account begins there in 21 with this. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. That's where this story starts. And I didn't hit on this necessarily in my message, but I so much appreciate that this is Easter morning. On Easter morning, there's still darkness. Mary comes to the tomb in the darkness. And again, for John, that means more than it was dark outside. It means that she's still in the dark. She doesn't have the knowledge. And then this, and the tears flow from this darkness. And so even in the Easter story, we are reminded of the crucifixion, which is so important to remember the crucifixion because it's connected to the resurrection and to the ascension. And so I love the way that this story takes time to unfold. And we shouldn't downplay the heavy grief that Mary was under here before the recognition. Yeah.
I mean, it seems like the darkness for her here is that God has abandoned her.
Yeah.
That the hope is gone.
Right.
It's a spiritual condition that we all, can resonate with, because there's going to be moments in our life and seasons in our life where it's still dark. Mm-hmm. I don't feel God. I don't feel like God's near. I feel like my hope is lost. We all hit that. And to miss that is really, it's early. The sun hasn't risen. Well, sure. Okay. But that's not exactly what John's trying to say. Because if you go back through the gospel, the light shines into the darkness in the very opening chapter of John's gospel. Then you get into like the story of Nicodemus. And it says, while it was still dark, he goes and talks to Jesus. And John's saying more than just the time of day, as you're pointing to. It's
also helpful to realize that crucifixion and resurrection, while it is kind of a one-time event in history, it is a pattern. And you've just been saying this, it is a pattern of our lives. We're not going to step into the light come out of the womb, step into the light, and stay in the light our entire life, there are going to be days and times of darkness.
Yeah, there's going to be death and there's going to be rebirth.
Yeah.
It's going to be something gone and there's going to be new life. And even the Christian tradition gets into some of the Christian writers throughout our history have talked about the dark night of the soul.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing. It feels bad if you're in it.
Yeah.
Because what the Christian authors historically have said is that there are seasons in our faith journey where the warm and fluffy feelings go away. And the temptation is to think, oh, there's something wrong with me. I've not prayed enough, or I've not gone to church or not enough, or I'm not believing in the right ways. All these kinds of things start happening. Like, no, that's not it. Actually, God is just helping you grow up when you're in those moments, because you're really beginning to learn that it's not about the warm and fluffy feelings. It's learning to trust, even when it's still dark, that God's still there with me. And it's just beautiful stuff. It really is practical.
Yeah, stuff that we can apply. Okay, so the story continues. So Mary goes to the tomb in the darkness, and then so she sees that the stone had been rolled away. She runs and tells Peter and the disciple whom Jesus loved. This could be a whole other podcast, but there's a disciple in John called the disciple whom Jesus loved. We're not exactly sure who that might be. People have made certain guesses about it, but all we get is that this is Peter and the disciple whom Jesus loved. And she tells him that his body has been removed from the tomb. So Peter and this other disciple, they race to the tomb. The other disciple gets there first. He looks into the tomb and he sees the linen wrappings. Peter arrives, goes into the tomb and sees the head wrappings of Jesus. Now the other disciple finally goes into the tomb, sees and believes. We're not exactly sure what it is that he believes, but we're told he believes. Then they just walk out of the tomb and go home. And I think there's something to be said there, which wasn't the point of my sermon, is that the guys don't come across very well in the resurrection stories.
Not at all.
But the women do. And they're like, okay, all right. They just went back home. Like they just went back to what was normal. They went back to their past lives.
I mean, they get it, but it hasn't got them yet.
Right.
The fact that they go back home says they're going back to life as normal.
Yeah.
And I mean, so often, that's what happens even today with this big Easter Sunday moment. And oh, it's this wonderful.
Mountaintop.
And then go back to normal. And that's just the temptation always. It doesn't change us yet.
So now we arrive at the text, verse 11. But Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. And we've already hit on this, but this darkness represents her mourning, her sorrow. She has just witnessed the crucifixion. She's been there. Just imagine the trauma that she went through. And this is someone that she had a really, really close relationship with. And then there are these tears. It hit me this time more than any other time I've looked at this, that this story is a tear-soaked story from the beginning to the end. Now, there's a change, but we're talking about tears from the beginning and the end. And now, Mary doesn't know it yet. As a character in this story, she doesn't know what the reader might know, because the keen reader, the one who is using these spiritual eyes and has had some help, sees that the darkness is a call back to the first words in the Gospel of John, and you've mentioned that. So John begins with the 18-verse prologue, which says, "In the beginning." So automatically we know that this is a throwback to creation, right? So in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God, and all things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness. This is the beginning of John, and the darkness did not overtake it. And of course, that makes us think about the beginning in Genesis, which says, when God began to create the heavens and the earth was complete chaos, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And so John wants us to know that resurrection is a new beginning, and it's actually a new creation. It's just mind-blowing how profound this is. But for the moment, Mary's still in the dark.
Yeah. Well, I mean, do you think that maybe if you put the John 1 text alongside the Easter moment, if you put those two together and you think about what John's getting at, is he talking about resurrection as a pattern?
I think so.
God's eternal pattern, just as God called out life in the beginning out of nothing, God's doing it again.
Right.
In this moment of Jesus' resurrection. And then there's a promise for us in that too.
Yeah.
It's
he's about to do it for
it's
Mary.
God's eternal pattern almost. Yeah. The argument could be made. There's ways to push back on that too. I want to acknowledge. But, But yeah.
So now I talked about helping us move through this very familiar story because the movements are dramatic. So she's still in sorrow, but now it's going to be compounded by misunderstanding as we continue. In verse 11, as she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb, and she saw two angels in white sitting where the body of Jesus had been lying, one at the head, the other at the feet. And they said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" This idea of weeping keeps coming up. And she said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." And again, maybe I'm overemphasizing the fact that she's still in her grief. You said in the first week of this series that Mary Magdalene was possessed by 7 demons, and Jesus exorcised those demons for her. We don't know exactly what that was, but we can at least say that it must have been, psychologically and emotionally traumatic.
It doesn't sound good.
No, it does not. It does not sound good. Right. And so because of this healing, Mary and Jesus became very, very close. And you addressed this as well, but we tend to think of Mary Magdalene as Mary from Magdala, which is a place, but that word also can be translated tower. And I didn't get into this, but I did say that Mary was a towering disciple. A towering disciple. After all, she's there.
The preacher to the preachers.
Yeah.
She's the one she's the one that's in all of the accounts, and she's the one that kind of, we get the sense is leading the charge to the tomb, and then has the courage to speak to the disciples and their fear. She is a towering figure. Yeah. 100%.
And in this moment, though, she's still suffering. She's still suffering. So here's another one of John's layers that's really cool when you see it. She saw the place where Jesus was, where Jesus had been, and then she saw these 2 angels, one where Jesus's head would have been, one where his feet would have been. Well, that's a picture of the Ark of the Covenant inside the temple, inside the Holy of Holies. And that was the representation for the people of Israel of God's presence. And so what John wants to say here, it seems to me, is that now the presence of God is with Jesus.
He's the Ark?
Yeah.
Interesting.
He's the representation of the presence.
Yeah.
Of the presence of God.
Interesting. Huh. Well, in the Old Testament Hebrew Bible accounts of the Ark of the Covenant, the story goes, no army can be defeated when it's got the Ark. Or the legend has it, you know. Which I'm always want to be very cautious with those violent type of stories that you find in the Hebrew Bible, but the symbolism's interesting, like this presence will not be defeated.
It's I guess we could argue with this layer because it is a layer. It's underneath what is obvious. But I think to say that one angel was at the head and one angel was at the feet, and that's in the Ark of the Covenant, you've got the cherubim, one at the head and one at the feet. It seems rather obvious at what John is trying to say.
Well, the gardener stuff too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pointing somewhere.
Exactly.
Yeah, just think about, plant that seed, just pointing somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
The story continues in 14. When she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not know that it was Jesus. And I really do, as we talked before, I think this message, John, he has his community in mind, of course, but I think he also has us in mind because as we've already established, we're not going to see the bodily Jesus standing in front of us. And so we need help to see him, but he's there, right? But he's there. So I think this is encouragement. In the end, this is going to be encouragement for us that Mary didn't recognize him. And so we sometimes don't recognize them because we're under the same limitation. But she's still in this state of misunderstanding. It says that she did not know. She just did not know yet. And it's slowly the story is unfolding. Yeah.
No, it's not. The recognition's not there. Mm-hmm. Christ is there, but she didn't see it. Yeah.
So now the next move, still in sorrow and misunderstanding, and now it's going to be compounded by just confusion. So 15 says, Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" There's that weeping again. "Whom are you looking for?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Back in your message of the first disciples, back in chapter 1, the question was, what are you looking for? This question gets repeated, only it's advanced, and the question isn't what are you looking for, but whom are you looking for?
Yeah.
So now I think the lesson here is what you're looking for, what I'm looking for, what Andrew, our producer, is looking for, what everyone is looking for it's not a what, it's a who.
Yeah. A person. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We want personal relationship. We long to love.
Yeah.
And you don't love a tree like you do a person necessarily. But yeah, as I think about that moment where she's standing there, she's grieving, as a pastor, the image that comes to my mind is when you have a funeral and the deceased person is laying there, and then the family is standing there by the casket, shaking hands with folks, and every single person that walks up there, they call you by name.
Yeah. Yeah.
They do. I mean, if you've ever had a loved one die.
Yeah.
And I remember whenever I've had loved ones die and I'm standing there as a family member,
right?
I remember the people who came.
Oh, yeah.
I remember them. Yeah. And they called me by name, and they met me in my pain. Mm-hmm. They're, in a sense, Christ's presence in my life. Mm-hmm. Very much so. Mm-hmm. And I guess that's what I'm looking for, right? What am I looking for? I'm looking for someone to bear the pain with me.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, in the Catholic Church, they have a practice called, do not neglect to visit the dead, or something like it's something I'm probably getting it wrong, but essentially what it comes out to be is like one of their commands is to show up at viewings, is to show up at the funeral.
Yeah.
Is you show up, you go.
Right.
And I have to wonder maybe if this is connected to some of this, is like the Catholic tradition, they've been at it for a while. And
well, you're so good at making it real and finding the modern application in the everyday. Yeah. Now, the funeral is not the everyday in one sense, but it is in another.
To everybody in the end.
Yeah.
If you live long enough, you're going to lose somebody.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I don't want to get us too far off track, but I've just, as I listened to your sermon and then read the text, I just couldn't help but to think about, done a couple funerals recently. You've done a couple funerals recently, and people I don't even think they see the impact of what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the gardener, and that's another interesting aspect of this. But before we get there, we'll hold off on that. So here's the gardener layer. So Jesus is buried in a garden. He's raised in a garden. So in one sense, Mary was not wrong. Jesus is the gardener. And again, we come back to John, and if we can see under the surface, it seems as if John might be saying, again, this is a renewed Garden of Eden, and God has done that in Christ.
The reversal.
Yeah. So he is the gardener. Yeah. I love that. That in itself will produce its own sermon, I think, sometimes. Okay, so finally, the movement goes from sorrow to recognition, producing joy, as if those tears of sorrow suddenly dry up and they're replaced by these tears of joy. And so the tears still continue to dominate in this story. So in verse 16, Jesus says to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. And so teacher, if she calls him teacher, that must mean she's a student. And we're back to this idea that this wasn't just a woman, this was a disciple.
Mm-hmm.
She is a student. She is a student of Jesus. And she's special in that.
It's an egalitarian move, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. And she's the first to see, she's the first student, the first disciple to see the risen Christ.
And praise the Lord, it's a woman at first.
Right.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Okay, so there's another layer here in the recognition of Jesus's voice. And of course, that comes back to one of the great I am sayings. And Jesus said, I am the good shepherd and my sheep know my voice. Wow. So here it is. She doesn't recognize him until she hears his voice calling her name. You've been talking about that, and that's where the recognition comes. Now it's at this point that I think that there was an embrace there. That it's not described necessarily in the text, but I think because what we're going to hear next is that he says, "Don't hold on to me," that there was this embrace. And I found a piece of art to illustrate that, because most of the art that comes up most readily has this really, to me, off-putting body language of Jesus, almost with his back turned to Mary, with his hand out, like, don't touch me. Which I don't think, that couldn't have been the sense. It had to be this recognition that this is my friend and you're alive, and wow, because when we come to this this next section, Jesus says to her, "Don't touch me, because I have not yet ascended to the Father." So that's one of the huge questions, right, down through the ages. What did he mean by that? And we could go through some of those, but I found came across one this time, which I think says it so well. And it speaks to what we talk about a lot here at Methodist Temple, and that even when we talk about the theme of our series, that God in Christ is present by the power of the Holy Spirit. He's right there in our everyday lives. And so the Christ that we have access to today is the resurrected Christ. And that will be, from this point forward in this story, that will be the access that Mary has to the risen Christ, is through the resurrection and through the ascension. And so by this interpretation, Jesus is saying, don't hold on to the me that you used to know. As lovely as that was, as special as that was, it's not going to be that way anymore, because I've been changed. I'm in the process of being ascended. So for John, and this is something that is kind of hard to think about when you first read it, but apparently for John, this ascension and resurrection they're together, and Jesus at this moment is in the process. He's in the process of ascending, and so. But I like that, because once again, I think that John is thinking about his community, because they're wondering, where is Jesus? Jesus is gone. We expect him to come back. He's not back. Where is he? And then that's the exact same place that we're standing. Mm-hmm. Where is he? Because we're not. It's impossible for us to have that one-on-one real relationship with Jesus of the first century. I want to be very, very clear. I love that Jesus too. I love the stories. I love everything about it. But what we have access to, and what really matters today, is that we have access to the risen Christ. Yeah.
I mean, the idea of the ascension theologically is that Christ is universally available. Mm-hmm. Not like in the first century context where you had to be literally, physically with him to be with him. Mm-hmm. Now Christ is universally available.
Right.
And that's that's where it's pointing us to.
Mm-hmm. As long as we're careful.
We can't cling to it.
Right.
But Christ is there.
Yeah, as long as we don't think ascension means, once again, that it's the old man in the sky somewhere,
Right.
that ascension means more than just going up.
It's a theological statement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just kind of wrap this up rather quickly. So then we get this recognition, and then we get a commissioning by Jesus. Jesus sends her, and what does she do? She goes.
Mm-hmm.
She goes. So she's the first one. She's the first one to witness. She's the first witness of the resurrection, and she's the first one to proclaim the good news.
Mm-hmm.
And she's the, as you referred to, she's the apostle to the apostles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So she's a real giant. So Mary's sorrow turns to joy, not because she recognized that the stone had been rolled away and that Jesus wasn't there. So it wasn't the empty tomb that convinced her. It wasn't the two angels that convinced her. It was this relationship with Jesus, with this recognition that she knew his voice. And I found this from Karl Rahner, who's a prominent 20th century Jesuit theologian. And he once predicted that the Christian of the future will be a mystic, or he will not exist at all. And we could get into a definition of mysticism that even you and I wouldn't agree with, but at its basic level, it just means experiencing God.
Yeah, you go from I believe to I'm aware.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, from I believe to I'm aware. So it wasn't because of any kind of a statement that anybody made. It was because of this relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And because of this relationship. One last little story. Jessica Welcher works for Community One, and she has a history here at Methodist Temple, and she spoke to our men's breakfast just this past Saturday. And Community One works in neighborhoods in Evansville, in blighted neighborhoods, and neighborhoods under stress. It was an excellent presentation. And when it was over, in the Q&A, I said, what about the fear that surrounds some of these neighborhoods where you're working, like on the inner city and on the south side of Evansville and on the near north side of Evansville and in other places? There are people who avoid those areas. There's fear about going into those areas. And even within those communities, there's fear and people want to flee from those. How do you handle that fear? I said, especially given the case of Susan Haney, who was murdered in her home, and even Nancy Guthrie, an elderly woman, taken out of her home, Savannah Guthrie's mother. So we have a lot of fear around these kinds of things. And Jessica said something that was kind of simple but yet profound, and it just really hit me. And what she said, and now I'm paraphrasing her and boiling it down. She said it's about proximity. It's about going into those neighborhoods, not viewing those neighborhoods and the people of those neighborhoods from the outside, but going in. And now you know names. Mm-hmm. Now you know this is John and this is Jane. And you begin to build relationships, and you realize that there are so many more people inside those neighborhoods who are more like us than we would even imagine. Mm-hmm. People who don't need to be feared. Is there an element? Should we be on our guard? Of course, we should be on our guard anywhere. But this word about getting proximity to people, that's the way you handle that. And I thought, well, that's the answer. That's the answer to almost everything. Mm-hmm. I mean, that we need to get close to, next to, proximate to Jesus. Mm-hmm. And I said, because I'm going to be going into the Branchville prison tomorrow with the Kairos Prison Ministry, and I said, I'm going there to get proximate to Jesus, because that's what Jesus promised would happen.
Right. Yeah. When you know their names.
Yeah.
And their stories.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
You see them as people.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, I think that's the truth. That's, the rubber hits the road kind of a truth we're talking about.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. Just a little bit about Emmaus.
We find Christ in the practice of hospitality, mm-hmm. welcoming the stranger. It's as old as the Bible commands it again and again. We should not be surprised that Christ is discovered in the welcome of a stranger. The disciples, they welcome this person. They didn't even know who he was. And it turns out it's Jesus. And I mean, that's, to me, I would say that's one of the big, if not the biggest practice of Christianity itself, is a willingness to do that. Because the Bible says it's in the strangers. You better be careful. You might find God.
Yeah. And that meal had something to do with it too, right? It's like, that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty cool. Yeah. All right. Well, very good. Thank you so much for joining us for the podcast. We're really happy that you found it. We hope that it's useful to you, that you can get something out of it. And if you want to worship with us, you can do that too. If you don't have a church home, we worship traditionally at 8:30 and then contemporarily at 11 o'clock. So love to see you someday, or even online. Anyway, have a great week. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Pastor Podcast with Randy and Andy. We hope you'll join us next week. We see Christ in you.